Welcome to Panels and Borders. I'm Dominic. So this video is going to be probably one of the most personal videos I've ever made on my channel. It's not going to have a lot to do with movies, comics, pop culture, nothing like that. But today is kind of an important date for me. So it was exactly 10 years ago today that my father passed away. Passed away the day after Canada Day, 2009. So my dad, probably around 2004, 2005, he had started to develop dementia. And so it was kind of it wasn't like an overnight thing. It was a slow process, and but it was a hard thing to watch when your parents go through something like that, where they gradually lose their mind over time. And they don't know where they are, who they are, where they're at, and so this really started. Signs of this started to pop up with my dad around 2003, 2004. And the thing about it is, he knew it was happening, because you don't lose your faculties all at once. He would have periods where he wouldn't remember who my mother was, then he would remember. So he knew that something was up, and he knew it was happening. So it kind of like really freaked him out. Then it got to a point where he just didn't know anything. Didn't know where he was, what time period he was in, and stuff like that. And so anyway, around 2006, he went into long-term care, and then finally in 2009 he passed away. So me and my dad, we didn't have a lot in common as far as interests go. You know, my dad was a very outdoorsy person. He was always out hunting, fishing. That was his main thing. He loved doing that, where I didn't really have any interest in that. You know, I was interested in like drawing, writing. I was interested in comics. Then when it came to entertainment, we had a few things in common, but when it came to movies and stuff, he was really into westerns. That was his thing. He loved watching westerns, and you know, he liked country music, where I liked hard rock, 80s pop. I couldn't stand country music when I was a kid. And I didn't really have any interest in westerns. There was a few exceptions when I was a kid. There's a few westerns I did enjoy. One of them was Pale Rider by Clint Eastwood. And where I was into science fiction, I loved Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff like that. Where my dad had basically no time for that stuff, especially Star Wars. My dad couldn't stand Star Wars. The appeal of it, he just did not get it. It's just he just thought it was nonsense and never could understand what I saw in it. The only science fiction I could get him to watch sometimes was he would watch the occasional Star Trek episode with me, the original series or Next Generation, and those he didn't mind. He would enjoy those, but a lot of the other stuff, and he would watch the occasional like superhero movie with me, but he did it more or less to just entertain me. Given a choice, that's something he would never ever watch on his own. And then when I got older, I did the same thing for him. I'd sit down and watch a lot of westerns with him, not because I was in the westerns, but more or less just to entertain him. Some of the things we did have in common, though, is we both liked mafia movies. So stuff like The Godfather and stuff like that. That's some of the movies we had in common that we both really liked. And The Untouchables, that film with Kevin Costner. We both liked that movie. Stuff like that we both liked. But my mom too wasn't into any of the same stuff I was into. She had no time for science fiction, stuff like that. But my parents always entertained my hobbies. You know, my dad, bought me a lot of comic books, even though he had no interest in comics or superheroes. And they always bought me you know, a lot of Masters of the Universe stuff. They were aware of it enough to know that I was in all that kind of stuff. And there was quite a generational gap between me and my father. My parents had me very late. Like, there's a big gap between me and my siblings. My father was 47 when I was born. My mom was 39. And most of their kids were getting to that point. The kids that they did have at that point, some of them were already married and moved out at that point, and some of them were on the verge of moving out. So they had kind of settled into the idea that they were just about done raising their kids, and then I came along. It was an accident, obviously. And so there's a big, huge generational gap between me and my dad. But even though we had a lot of differences in entertainment and stuff like that, we had a few things in common. Like the other thing we had in common was wrestling. We both really enjoyed sitting down and watching the WWF. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of developed some of the interests that my dad had. Like my father was a huge news junkie. That was his main thing, Westerns and the news. Those are the two things I remember my dad watching very religiously. So my dad would never miss the 6 o'clock news, or the 10 o'clock news, or the morning news. So here in Canada, we have Canada AM was one of the big popular news shows. So every morning, I knew usually when it was time to get up out of bed, because my dad would be up watching Canada AM. I would hear the like music for the news show starting up. That's kind of how I knew it was soon going to be time to get up and go to school. So he would be watching Canada AM. Same thing, 6 o'clock. It was local news. He would never miss that. And then he would always watch the 10 o'clock news on CBC, which was usually the National. That was the one he always watched. And so that he would watch those, and then he would always be watching the Weather Network. And so he was a huge news guy. And then when we got cable later on in later years, then we got those, you got the 24-hour news stations. So my dad would watch that like constantly, where I found all that completely boring when I was a kid. I had no use for it. But now that I'm older, I find myself becoming kind of a news junkie like my dad was. Like, I'll read a lot of news articles, and I'll watch a lot of news-related YouTube videos and stuff about things that's happening around the world, and things that's happening in politics and stuff like that. Where when I was a kid, I just had no interest in it. Like politics and stuff happening on the news, I thought it was completely boring. I just did not have any interest in it whatsoever. Where my dad was always glued to it and always wanted to watch it. But when he passed away, it was kind of an interesting thing. It didn't nail me in the way that I thought it would, having a parent die before I lost either parent. Because where his mind had gone slowly, he was already kind of gone for a while. So like around 2009, I would go visit him. He would have no clue who I was, and nothing he talked about would make any sense. So it wasn't really my father anymore. It was like basically my father and a parents only, but he had become someone like that I didn't recognize. So I was already in the grieving process for a long time, for a few years, when he finally passed away. And it's interesting, it took a few weeks after he died. I got the news and he passed away, and after he died and stuff, for it to actually sink in, for it to actually hit me. And like when you have a parent die, it's one of those events. You have like a handful of events in your life that when it happens, nothing is ever the same again. Like it could be the death of a parent or a move across the country. Like when you're a kid, it's just one of those things that happens. Like it alters your world around. It alters your worldview, and you never look at the world the same way again. Well, that's how it was when my dad became ill with dementia, and then when he passed away. Like, I never looked at the world the same way again. It changed the way I looked at the world. And then again, when my mother passed away, she passed away almost 2 years ago. now that both my parents are gone, like, and that's the thing, you deal with it, but you never really move on. Like, I think about my parents every day. Like, there's not a day that goes by I don't think about my dad or my mom, or I think about both. And so that's always going to be there. And it's made me become a lot more aware of my own mortality, and aware that, of, because when you're young and you're with your parents and stuff, like, you don't have the concept of loss, really. Like, you think the environment you live in, the house you grew up in, and your parents, like, from that point of view when you're a kid, it feels like that's gonna last forever. I mean, on an intellectual level that it's gonna end at some point, but emotionally you don't really know it until it happens, and then that's when, reality really slaps you in the face hard. And so it's one of those things that, unfortunately, death is a negative thing that changes your worldview. It's a negative thing, but it can also be like a positive learning experience, because it teaches you to let go of things, and it teaches you that things are going to end at some point. Things don't last forever. And but also the same can be true when you have a kid, or have a child of your own. When that kid's born, then the experience of being a parent is also something that will change your worldview, and you'll never look at the world the same way again after that. Now, that's just an assumption I'm making, but it's probably true, because I don't have any kids of my own. But I would assume that is true. So that's actually where I'm on my way right now. I'm out on my way to my parents' grave, and my parents weren't perfect, but I'm very grateful that I had the parents that I had, and I grew up in the environment that I grew up in. I'm very lucky to have the childhood I had, and thankful to my parents, even though they didn't understand all the stuff I was into, like Star Wars, Masters of the Universe, comic books and all that. They still like supported it, or they still entertained it, still bought me the comics, bought me the toys, and things like that, gave me the money to rent the movies and those kind of things. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. This is kind of more of a personal video, but just talk about that experience, since I didn't really know what to talk about today in a car rant video, but until I realized that it was exactly 10 years ago to the day that my father passed away. So that's everything I got to say in that video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. Thank you to all of my subscribers, and thank you for watching this video. And if you're new to the channel, like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to hit the bell icon for notification when new videos are uploaded.